You know, there's nothing like cracking that cellophane and pulling that record out. It just smells great.
Welcome to BODS Mayhem Hour.
Non-stop hardcore energy.
I love the show, guys. You're awesome.
Unlike any other.
With your host, John the Bod, a.k.a. the Bod Father.
Man, this stuff rocks.
Hi, this is Jeffrey Reddick, the creator of the Final Destination film franchise, and you are listening to BODS Mayhem Hour.
The views and opinions of the guests do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of BODS Mayhem Hour, its staff, affiliates, or sponsors. Parental discretion is advised. Welcome to BODS Mayhem Hour.
Hey everybody, welcome to BODS Mayhem Hour Halloween Bash 2022. I hope you guys are getting your candy and you're driving your parents up the wall, because that's what it's all about, and you're scaring everybody. I don't care who it is. But before I bring my awesome guest on here to talk about all of his stuff that he's been a part of, do me a favor, folks, go out and subscribe to BODS Mayhem Hour. Go out to the YouTube page, just click the notification bell, click subscribe. That would help me out tremendously. And that will, let you guys know exactly what's going on with the podcast. And don't sleep on this, folks. This is absolutely good stuff. Good stuff. But anyway, happy Halloween to all you ghouls and goblins out there. And I want to welcome my guest on the Halloween Bash this year. Writer, director, and producer Jeffrey Reddick. Jeffrey wrote a spot script for an X-Files episode that turned into what led to be Final Destination. But we're going to talk about all this stuff. And plus, he's also created films such as like Tamara, the remake of Day of the Dead from 2008, Dead Awake, and feature film directorial debut in 2020 with Don't Look Back. And Jeffrey's paved his way, folks. He's a good old Eastern Kentucky boy. So we're good guys right here. So it's good to see somebody from Eastern Kentucky getting out and doing what they love. So Jeffrey, my friend, welcome to the podcast and happy Halloween.
Thanks for having me, John. Happy Halloween, my friend.
How you doing?
I'm doing well. Just working, grinding away.
I got to know, man, what got you into writing? What was it about it that said, hey, I want to try this? Was it just something that just came on and you just, explored it and liked it?
You know what? Writing was, I think English was probably my best subject in school. I'm pretty bad at math and science and everything else. But, English was always my favorite subject, but I always wanted to be an actor. And, when I was young, I studied theater. I went to college in Berea College, Kentucky, which I love. It's funny, I went to Jackson, and for high school. And I remember my English teacher, Maria Bellamy, was very supportive of the arts. And so she created like a little theater program for like one year. The whole class got to do theater, which was amazing. So, certainly miss those days in Jackson and Berea. And then I went to New York to study acting for the summer and got an internship at New Line Cinema while I was up there and got an acting agent. But acting was pretty, it's a tough business. But back in the 90s when I went up there, it was pretty hard if you weren't a white actor. There were just a very limited number of roles for you in film and television at that time. So my agent was just very honest with me, and she's like, you're really talented, but there aren't a lot of roles for people that look like you right now. And so then I was like, well, screw it. I'll just start writing stuff and then I'll put myself in it. But I kept writing about killing teenagers, and I obviously quit being a teenager. So I didn't want to do like a Dawson's Creek where I'm like 30 playing like I'm in high school. So
yes,
I've done a few cameos in some of my stuff, so I've still got to do that. But I've always wanted to work in the entertainment industry. That's been a dream of mine since I was a child, and so I figured one way or the other I was going to make it work. So if acting wasn't going to pan out, then I was going to put writing was kind of my second passion after acting.
But here you are working your way up to be an actor. And for somebody to tell you just because the color of your skin is the reason why you can't do it, to me, that's bullshit. But coming up in that time, everything was different, like you said. How difficult was that for you to swallow that and be like, oh God, what do I do now? I got to do this.
I mean, again, we're always a product of our time. I mean, certainly, and I say this with all the love in my heart for where I grew up, but where I grew up in Eastern Kentucky, like it was me, my sister, and two other people were the first two, non-white people to go through our school system. Like, so I kind of knew what it was. I knew kind of what the environment was like back then, as far as, people, there's still being some issues, that people had. And, the amazing thing is I saw people change over time, people that had certain kind of views, who, ended up, getting to know me and my family and loving us with all their hearts. So that was always something that I carried forward with me. But I kind of knew that was the lay of the land back then in the 90s. I think if we all look back, we kind of all did. I remember, Vanessa Williams was the first Black, Miss America. And I remember just reading articles about how they got hate mail and, people were boycotting the pageants. I mean, I think I'm a little older than you, but times have thankfully, things have gotten better, a lot better. So I just kind of rolled. I was used to rolling with it at that point, to be honest. So when they told me that, it was just like, well, I'm not giving up. I'm still going to work in this business. That's part of my hillbilly backbone is I'm not going to give up. I may not be able to get in the business as exactly how I plan, but I'm still going to get in this damn business. So
yeah, exactly, man. We are resilient.
We are very resilient.
Yep.
Yes.
And, talk about all the flooding we had back in August and everything, man. We are resilient. And hey, man, if you ever want a good Southern cooked meal again, my door's always open. So come on.
Oh, I appreciate that. That's the one.
Oh man.
Oh, I miss a lot. I miss the accents, and I miss how just friendly people are. And I miss the, my mom had the mouth of a sailor. So she, the most inappropriate sense of humor you can have. I miss all those good old raunchy jokes and the food.
God, yeah, fried maters. And what we mean by that, folks, is fried green tomatoes.
Fine green tomatoes, yep.
They are the best. Green beans, oh my God, there's nothing like green beans and chicken.
Yeah, chicken and dumplings. My mom made the best chicken and dumplings ever.
My God, don't get me started, Jeff.
Oh, yeah. So eat your Halloween candy. Right. Trying to make you hungry.
We're back on track here, damn it, Jeffrey. So when you were younger, growing up in Eastern Kentucky, were you a fan of horror movies and comics at that time? If so,
oh my God.
How did that? So how did that inspire you to be creative, possibly with all this down your path?
Yeah, no, I mean, I was a big fan of horror movies. Me and my friends, Calvin Som and Tony Calhoun, who still live in Eastern Kentucky in Jackson. We used to watch horror movies all the time when we were young. And, my mom at first didn't approve, but then she's like, well, at least you boys aren't out getting in trouble. So I'll let you watch these. And so we would look for, when we were that young, we were just looking for bloody movies, like, which is the worst bloody movie, but we also read Fangoria. So we knew how, we knew the behind the scenes that this was all make believe. So it allowed us to watch the films and enjoy them, for a lot more than just what we saw on screen. Like we would get Fangoria and we'd see how they made the special effects, and then we'd go to each other's houses and like make each other up and do like fake blood and stuff like that. I remember one time for Halloween, I went to school. God, I can't believe I'm telling this, but back when parachute pants and half shirts were a thing. Yeah. And I had wanted to do like a knife in my chest. So I put some cardboard against my chest and then cut a real butcher knife in half and then like super glued it and taped it under my shirt. Yeah. And it looked great for like an hour. And then I started noticing that there was actual blood coming down me. And I realized it was going into my skin because I'm like, dumb kid. Like, oh yeah, don't tape a real butcher knife to your chest because even if you break the edge, it's going to be sharp. So we loved horror movies, loved doing loved all about the makeup and the writing. Also was a huge comic book fan. X-Men, favorite title of all time. I remember my first issue of that was 159, where Dracula thank God they had a horror issue, or I'd have never read comics. But I saw Dracula on the cover because he was going after Storm in the X-Men. And so I was like, oh, scary. And then the next episode was like Ilyana getting pulled into hell. And so the first couple of issues that I read were horror centric. So that got me into the X-Men comic books. And then I started reading the other comic books. So that definitely influenced the stories I wanted to tell. I love horror fantasy. I also read a lot of Greek mythology in school, and I read Stephen King and Dean Koontz and then Clive Barker. So I read a lot of like horror kind of fantasy work when I was young as well. So that kind of stuff really inspired me. And I always explain it to people because they're like, well, why are you, why did you read all that dark stuff? And for me, again, it was partly the fascination with the behind the scenes of it, how they put it together. But I also think when you're young, like I think horror is an outlet a lot of times. Like you can sit with your friends and watch, people die on screen and it's not real, but you can scream and yell and kind of get all that fear out of your system in a safe space by watching these films. And so it was always kind of for me, when I write horror, it's never about trying to be like vicious or mean spirited. Like, I don't feel like the stuff I write like is exploitive in a way that it's like, you're celebrating violence. It's more like kind of the fun shock factor of it. Like I want people to like go, oh my God. And like with Final Destination, like just like, holy crap, have that kind of reaction. So for me, it's more trying to, it's like a comedian wanting to hear people laugh in a theater, at their jokes. It's like, you want them to yell and then start laughing.
I saw the best title for a movie, and I'm not knocking Final Destination or anything like that, or anything I love, but I just thought this was absolutely great and a hilarious title. Nope.
Oh, yeah. No, that's...
I mean, think about it. How many times do we look at each other and say, nope?
Yep. Yeah. No, that was a fun movie, and it's... when the guy does it, it's very funny in the movie. When the guy says it in the movie, it's like spot on.
I have not got to watch that yet, but that is on my agenda to watch because a few people said it's actually pretty good. So I'll give it a chance for sure.
All right, cool.
So how did you end up writing now, if I'm wrong on this, correct me. How did you end up writing a spec script for an X-Files episode? Let's talk about that a little bit. I didn't write it. What I did is I was trying to get an agent. So they had you write a script for something that was already on television. Oh, okay.
So X-Files was one of my favorite shows. So I ended up using the concept behind Final Destination as an X-Files episode, but I only sent that to the agent to get an agent. So we never actually sent it to the X-Files show. Okay. The people that I worked with at New Line were like, oh, this is a cool idea for a movie. So I just developed it as a movie. But kind of the cool karmic thing is that two of the writer-directors from the X-Files, James Wong and Glenn Morgan, came on board and did a rewrite and also directed the first film. So it was kind of cool that it started off years earlier, as a writing sample based on the X-Files, and then to have two of the people who did a lot of the best shows of the X-Files do the feature was kind of cool.
That is awesome. That is so awesome. But when you were approached maybe to say, hey, let's make this into a movie, what was your thoughts? Was you kind of like dumbfounded, like, well, really? You really want to do this? Well,
I wish it was that easy because I worked at New Line. So there were many, many scripts that I wrote that they didn't do.
Yeah.
So I had the idea for this to do it as a feature, but I also knew that in order for them to take it seriously, I needed to probably get some producers attached. So a friend of mine at New Line had just started working with these producers, Craig Perry and Warren Zide, who had a first look deal at New Line, which meant that they had to bring all their projects to New Line first. And they were working on American Pie, which everybody was excited about. And they sparked to the idea. So we developed it. At first, it was going to be all adults on the plane, which I kind of ended up using as a story for part 2. But then Scream came out, and teenagers were hot again at the box office. So they're like, let's make them high schoolers. I'm like, all right. So we ended up developing it a lot with New Line before they finally, I think it was like 8 months we were developing it before they finally agreed to like buy it and have me write the script, buy the story outline. So it was a long process, but at the end of the day, it was worth it.
How long did it take to complete that movie? Finally writing everything, getting what everybody wanted, and to get it perfect.
Well, they bought the story in 97. I wrote the script pretty quickly. And then they went out to directors. They brought James and Glenn on, and they did their writing. And then by the time it was shot, and it came out in 2000, so it was like a 3-year process, which actually for a film is pretty quick in Hollywood terms. Like, a lot of times it takes, once they buy a script, a lot of times it takes a long time to get like a director or actors attached to it. So, and then there's the whole time where they have to market it before it comes out. So we had 3 years is pretty quick in Hollywood time.
So are you shocked that Final Destination, the whole franchise, man, is like everybody's taken to it? Are you shocked that everybody digs this? Because a lot of franchise, man, they just fall off after the second movie normally. It's like, but this just kind of keeps on going and going with the same plot twist and everything. So it's perfect.
I mean, I had always hoped, just because again I grew up on these films, I always had hoped that it would be a franchise. But what really kind of humbles me is that it's kind of become part of the public zeitgeist. Like I'll hear people talking about having a Final Destination moment. Like sometimes I'll be at the store, I'll be at the coffee shop or something like that, and somebody like, oh man, we just had a Final Destination moment. And it's just that part of it's, I mean, again, it just makes me very happy because, as a horror fan, like if you'd have told little Hillbilly Jeffrey that someday he'd write a movie. I mean, little Hillbilly Jeffrey, I was talking to a friend of mine who said she talked to me when I was like 11 years old, I think, and asked me what I was going to do when I grew up. And I was like, I'm going to be a star in Hollywood. So little Hillbilly Jeffrey always dreamed about doing this, but as a horror fan, it's very humbling. I'm very grateful for all the fans that are out there who have kind of kept this, alive, and to have kind of Final Destination be like almost a word that everybody knows what you mean, like that's that is something I wasn't prepared for, and that's something that I'm just very humbled by that.
Oh, dude, I've had my Final Destination moment, and it sucked thanks to you.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's awesome. It's awesome because I was behind a log truck and I noticed the chain that was wrapped around and started shaking, and I was like, oh shit. Here we go, Final Destination again. I'm gonna get over in the fast lane if I can get past this guy real quick.
Well, and the funny thing is, Kentucky, every time I do interviews about this film, Kentucky gets all props because I read an article when I was flying home to visit my family about a woman who was on a plane and her mom called her, a woman who was on a trip, and her mom called her and said, don't take the flight you're scheduled to be on tomorrow because I have a bad feeling about it. And she switched planes. So that put the idea in my head for the first Final Destination. And I had the story worked out for the second movie, but the producer and I originally, it was going to be a hotel fire. And the producer was just like, we got to come up with something better than that. And I was going home again to see my family in Breathitt County, and I got behind a log truck, and I was like, I pulled into the next lane, and then it clicked for me, and I pulled off the highway, and I called the producer, and I was like, what about a log truck on it? And he was like, that's it. That's the opening. So every time I do interviews, I'm like, thank Eastern Kentucky for that, brothers.
There you go. I had my Final Destination moment thanks to Eastern Kentucky. Good old boy.
Yep.
Right. So when you were writing the Final Destination Part 2, did you want to stay traditionally to the first film or maybe change it up some, if any, possibly?
Yeah, no, I did want to change it up. I mean, there were a couple things I wanted to do. And I wrote the story for that. Eric Bress and Jay Mackey-Gruber wrote the full script, and I think they did an amazing job. But there were a couple things I wanted to do. Like I wanted to twist the formula where you think at the beginning it's going to follow these 4 teenagers, and it's going to be their story, and then I kill them all off except for AJ Cook, who played Kimberly. So I wanted to do that, and then I also wanted to show that the people who cheated death in the first film, that the fact that they were alive when they weren't supposed to be, had a ripple effect on other people. So I wanted to kind of expand the mythology. And then I also wanted to bring some of the, I wanted to bring like original character back from the first film, which is something I always love when franchises do that. So I got to do like 3 things I wanted to do with it that were kind of my favorite things, but especially the setting up the 4 kids as the leads and then killing the 3 of them off was definitely the most fun, because I was like, yeah, I want people to think, oh, this is going to be another teenager one. Yeah. And then it's like, oh no, they're dead. Wow.
Well, here's the other 3 again from the other movie. Oh, lame. Bye-bye. There's 2 other scenes, man, that really get me every damn time. Is the scene where the kid is he's at a construction site and he's walking under, and there's a big window. And
yeah, that's in part 2. Yeah.
That eeks me, man. It just sends chills up me. And then the other one is when the girl is on her cell phone and she gets a text or something other, and she just steps back into the road. Here comes this bus, and I was like,
oh yeah, that was the first film. Yeah, that was a great scene, and I think James Wan and Glenn Morgan did an amazing job with that. And I think David Ellis, he directed the second movie. He was a great director too. Like, I remember when I originally wrote the scene with the character getting killed by the glass, I had the glass kind of fall and like straight down, and like the character peeled into, like, it was much more gruesome. But I love this. I actually think what they did is actually better with the splatty. Poor guy, poor little kid. Yeah, it's just it's a mixture. The movies are always a mixture of the writing and also all the other pieces that go in, like the directing and the production design and the special effects and everything. So I think the way that they shot that was great. Yeah.
So is this the evil side of little Jeffrey that nobody knew about?
I don't think, it doesn't come from an evil place, because I know a lot of people, and honestly, like the horror writers that I know and the directors that I know are literally the nicest. It's like the fans, like that's why, you see so many fans at horror conventions. They're like the nicest people that you'll ever meet. And I think the filmmakers are the same way. And I think a lot of that's because maybe there's a part of us that, I think another reason people relate to horror films is not only is it kind of gives you an escape from the real life horrors and a place to like let that fear out. But, usually the heroes and heroines of horror films are usually kind of they're not the most popular person, in school, or the most beautiful. They're always the beautiful, but, they're not considered beautiful by, the standards of the movie. They're not always. So it's, and I think we all at some point feel like, we're a little bit of an outsider. We don't quite fit in. I think horror films always also appeal to that, because it's kind of the person that you underestimate who ends up saving the day. But I do all that to tie back into what you asked. I do know some writers that are like, yeah, when I get mad at somebody, I just write a character in there and murder them. And I don't do that. For me, it's more, again, I'm trying to I want the person watching the movie to have fun and get scared. And then I also try to think of things that I haven't seen before in a horror film, or how can I put a spin on this that's new? And sometimes I succeed and sometimes I don't. But I don't like being in a dark place. Like, and I know a lot of writers put themselves, they're like, oh, when I'm writing horror, I have to listen to really depressing stuff, and it's like, the world's depressing enough. Like,
just look at
so I try to have fun. Maybe I'm just but I might be deluding myself. There might be a little evil Jeff in there somewhere who's like, ha, keep telling yourself that, Jeffrey.
Oh, clip it. That's gonna be a soundbite right there. Thank God for horror movies, music, and comics. Whatever your niche is, man. For anybody out there who suffers through anything that lets you escape and just get out of reality for a while, man, just do it. Thank God for all this stuff, and you guys too for doing this, because I'm sure it's saved a lot of people's lives watching these movies and stuff.
I mean, well, I joke, especially when people will send me memes about the log trucks where they're like, I never drive by. I'm like, well, maybe I've saved some lives that way. But yeah, I mean, I think, that movies do provide an escape for people. I would never want to be so, like I've saved lives. I mean, the only things, and this is just me getting personal for a minute, the only thing is where I know that I've had an impact on people is, I'm gay, and I've actually been open about that since I was young, which I think has probably not helped my career in some ways, but it's just very important to me because I know when I was growing up, there weren't any role models really out there for me. And not that I want to be a role model, I'm not saying that at all, but I've had several people over the years come up to me at conventions who were suicidal because of their families like kicking them out and stuff like that. And they were like, Final Destination was my favorite movie. And when I found out like that you were gay, it just gave me hope that maybe life wasn't hopeless. And that's happened a couple of times. And so no matter what pushback I get from people who, I don't care. Like, I'm like, if me just being honest and authentic with who I am has made anybody feel less alone in the world. And certainly I've been told, like, again, several times that young people who were really considering suicide didn't do it. I'm like, I don't care what it cost me as far as, career stuff or, fans. I mean, I care about my fans a lot, but if me being a person of color or me being gay is going to be the thing that makes you stop being a fan, that's fine, because I think there's more good in there's more good in me just being honest about who I am. I'm also sober. I talk about that. Like, I quit drinking 14 years ago. Not that I ever push sobriety on anybody, but I always tell people, like, because there's such a stigma about asking for help, and people, even my own family, when I was going through struggles with it, they're like, why don't you just quit drinking? I don't understand. There's such a stigma that it's about weakness if you can't, quit drugs or alcohol, that a lot of people are afraid to even ask for help. And then they also think that they can't do it. They're not strong enough to do it, or they'll try it once, and if they fail, they give up. And so I'm very honest about being sober as well, because I feel like that's an issue we don't talk about enough. And that's an issue that a lot of people struggle with, whether they're struggling with it for themselves or for people in their own families. And then it's, there's a frustration there about, like, why can't my family member, get sober? So I'm very open about just having gotten sober, and it wasn't easy, and certainly in Hollywood, where every party is sponsored by vodka, it's really not easy getting sober in a town, in a big place like Los Angeles. But, that's just another aspect of my life where it's, I'm just honest with people about it, because if I can use whatever platform I have for good, I would rather be honest and try to help people in whatever way I can. And sometimes that's just being honest about my struggles, to let people know that they're not alone, whatever their struggles are. We all struggle with stuff. Yep. Coming from Eastern Kentucky, we were very, very poor. Yep. We had a farm. We worked my mom especially worked her ass off on the farm, and me and my sister helped out as much as we could. But people that don't live in that region don't understand what it's like. And it's not about people being lazy or people not wanting to work. It's like there's just, unfortunately, there's a lack of opportunity. And then people are like, well, why don't you just move? It's like, well, our generations going back hundreds and hundreds of years have all lived here, and we own this land. Mm-hmm. We can't just up and move somewhere else if there's not a job, and it should be about hopefully building our communities up and making them stronger, so that people don't have to leave. So anyway, I'm sorry, I'm getting off on a bunch of tangents here, but
you're totally fine, man. I completely understand. I struggle with, financially struggling every day, to put food on the table and do what I have to pay my bills. And I see why people do the things that they do to survive. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's sad, and I won't go that route, and I've even thought about moving, but you got to take all the stuff you've got saved up and then move, and hopefully you find a job by 2 months before.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
absolutely.
now the way everything is, nobody wants to work, so it should be good to find a job, but it's very hard. It's just hard to up and just go. It's very good. Anyway, so I gotta know this, man. How did you come up with all these death scenes? I mean, because you've got all these death scenes, but how did you like figure out all these ones that you want to do? Because there has to be like a limit to say, okay, I want to do all these, but I can't put them in this movie. And then, you know what I mean? Because there's a lot of death scenes you can come up with. So how do you keep coming up with them?
Yeah. Sometimes I recycle stuff from, if I wrote a script that didn't get made, but then somebody else wants to make another script with a story that I can squeeze death into. I mean, there's a couple of deaths, because in my original draft of Final Destination, because death didn't get him the first time, it kind of came back, and it was more Nightmare on Elm Street-y, where death kind of played with their troubles or sins or whatever you want to call it, and basically pushed them over the edge so they committed suicide. So it was a lot darker. So some of those scenes I just took and used in Tamara, for instance. So if I come up with a cool death scene, it's so weird. I hate when I say that. I sound like a psychopath. When I come up with the death scene that I think is like, oh, I haven't really seen this before, I'll just put that in another movie if I can. So you crib from yourself a lot of times, and sometimes you'll see a scene in a movie, and I try not to steal scenes from other movies, but I also am a huge horror fan, so I watch pretty much everything that comes out. So, I've seen pretty much every way to Sunday that you can kill somebody in film. So a lot of times for me, it's just about trying to put a spin on it. Like, okay, I've seen this, but I haven't seen this before.
If Final Destination was released in the 70s of the horror heyday, pretty much, would you think it would have just as much reaction and success if it was like today or not?
That's a good question. I don't think, well, it's weird because everybody's afraid of death, but in the 70s, in that time period, they were going through like war. There were a lot of other things that were happening in real time. I know we had a war going on here, but it was a much more personal war there. And I think that's why you got a lot of the kind of grindhouse, like horror that was based like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, things that were based on like, that felt more grounded in reality. So I don't know if a supernatural horror film like Final Destination, like especially with it with just being death itself, I don't know, like, people were more scared of like the Exorcist, they were Exorcist and like, more kind of either religious kind of horror, themed horror, like the devil kind of coming to get you, or like, again, like the psycho who lived next door, that Last House on the Left, it was more like people hurting each other in a more realistic way that I think was really striking a chord back then, because that's kind of what the society was going through. I think films in general often reflect the time that they're made in. And so I don't think it would have had the effect that it had now, because it would have been a different movie also. Like, I was very mindful when I made this movie. Like, I didn't want to tie death into any kind of specific religious or cultural belief. I just wanted it to be death, because death is universal. And I think that's why part of why Final Destination has been a success is it translates, globally. I mean, the movie does as well, or sometimes even better internationally if you break down the box office. Yeah. And I think that's because, we tap into that universality of death, and it's not tied to any specific belief system. So you don't have to, whether you have a religious background or you don't, you're still afraid of dying, or maybe not afraid of it, but death is something that you can relate to. So you don't have that barrier of, if you're, a Christian, you don't have that barrier of, if I had done it like a Hindu kind of belief where you could separate it out, or if you're if it was a Muslim portrayal of death, then, if you're an atheist, you could be like, I don't believe in this. because you believe, we all know that death happens. So you can, it can hit you no matter what your background is.
Yeah, that's the only thing we're guaranteed is death. It's sadly, I wish I was guaranteed like the lottery big time.
I know, just one lottery.
One time.
I'm not even greedy. Yeah, I just want one.
One time. One big ticket.
One big ticket.
Now, I don't think, man, honestly, people back in the 70s would be ready for that Final Destination. I think I'm on the lines with you. Like, they wanted the slashers. They wanted the space, the aliens. They wanted, the serial killers, stuff like that. They wanted things like that. They didn't want this. I don't think Final Destination they was ready for. That's just me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it would have been, and not that the movie is any kind of like, I'm not trying to say it's high, like, I think it would have just been over their head. Not over. It's just not where they would have been like, what the fuck is this? Things are falling and killing them. I think they would have just been like, what the hell is that?
Was they smoking in this one? They smoked too much weed in this one, boys and girls.
Yeah. These guys were high when they wrote this movie. It don't make no sense.
So you tackled GeorgeARomero's 1985 film Day of the Dead. You did a remake of it. Now, you wasn't all satisfied with this, but man, what was it about it that you wasn't happy with, or you thought you could done better if possible?
Well, this situation is twofold. It's like, I'm a writer, so writing is what I do for a living. So I have to make a living. But when I was brought onto this project, they already had a director, Steve Miner, attached. And Steve Miner has done some of my favorite movies like House and Warlock, Friday the 13th, 2 and 3. And he was just somebody, Halloween H2O, like he's somebody that I was super excited to work with. And so I knew they were going to make this movie, whether I was involved or not. So I went in with my best pitch that was going to be very kind of faithful to the original and just kind of update it for a modern audience. And, again, I'm not trying to make excuses because I've written some bad stuff. And if I write some bad stuff, I will completely admit it. But this was a situation where the more time that I worked on it, the more they kept making me change it. And it got to a point where I had to call my manager and I'm like, you have to tell them I can't make any more changes to this because it's already gotten so far away from what the original Day of the Dead is. Oh man. That we're going to get murder. And I told him when I first started writing, there's going to be a segment of the population that hates this movie because it's a remake. Yeah. But then as it got further and further away, I'm like, guys, we might as well just change the title at this point because it's so far from. And if you see interviews with me, when I first got hired, I was in interviews. I was like, fans, I think are going to be really happy. And then if you see later interviews after I finished it, I was like, it's a movie. I just I knew what was going to happen. And because I'm a fan myself, so I'm very mindful of the fan base. So, you obviously learn to separate yourself from films at the time. And I can objectively say if you just turned the movie on and watched it, it's a really fun zombie movie. It really is. If it was called anything else, I think it would have gotten a much better reception than it did. But yes, but now there's 2 remakes. The same company has done 2 remakes. I think they did a remake maybe 4 years after that one, and then they just did another remake. Oh. So there's been like 2 more remakes of Day of the Dead from the same company. So
see, Jeffrey brings
mine's the best. I will say that of the 3 remakes, mine's the best.
See, folks, Jeffrey brings evil Jeffrey during those interviews at the end.
Oh, ooh, look at me. See?
I told you.
I'm like I'm an angel. I'm an angel straight from the straight from the holler. And then you're like, no, there's the evil Jeffrey.
So in 2020, man, you made your directorial debut with your film Don't Look Back. How cool was it to direct this film and be able to do everything you wanted to do with it?
It was great. I'm really happy with how the film turned out. Directing, it's funny because you're always, when somebody else directs your movie, you're like, oh, they didn't direct the movie like I saw it. And then I did learn through directing myself that unless you have a very big budget, you can't. The movie that you direct is what you have in your head is much bigger than what you can do in real life. So, we had a small budget for that film, and again, it was more of a mystery kind of because you're not sure if it's a killer or a supernatural threat that's coming after these people. So we could never show the kills. So I kind of knew that was always going to be an issue. And I'm one of those horror fans where I have a very wide swath of what I consider horror films. Like, you know, for me, Silence of the Lambs is a horror film. But I used to hate it when directors would be like, well, this isn't really a horror film. It's more of a psychological thriller, because they were saying it as if being a horror film is a bad thing. And so I always hate when people say that. But just to set expectations for this film, it actually it's not horror in the sense that you would expect from a Final Destination guy, because again, I couldn't show the deaths because that would give away what's going on behind the scenes. So it is more of a mystery. So I had to, you know, do a lot of because a lot of the fans that saw it, there were a lot of people that appreciated it, but there were a lot of people that were like, well, you'd think he would know that we go to see these movies for like the blood and the guts, and there's not any blood and guts in there. I'm like, this wasn't that movie. Like I've got a couple movies I'm coming down the pipeline, hopefully soon, that will have the blood and guts in them. But for my first film, I learned so much, and you know, I'm very happy, especially considering the budget limitations that we had. I'm very happy with how it turned out, and excited to do it again.
What's the growth you've seen from yourself working on all of this, man? What have you seen that's grown the most in you as a writer, or just as a director, or anything that you can add to your repertoire?
That's interesting, and I love how you said repertoire.
Repertoire.
You know what I think? I think the most growth is, yeah, this is strange, but you know, during COVID, I had the opportunity to work on a couple of animated kid shows, and you know, horror has always been my safe space. You know, like I feel very confident writing in the genre. I love it. I was terrified to work with in animation. I mean, the showrunners who ran the show had worked on Kung Fu Panda and other huge cartoons. So I was surprised they picked me, even though I was excited. And but I was very nervous about writing it. You know, I think no matter how long you work in any capacity, like you still have that thing in you that's like, I'm good at this, but I'm not good at that. And so I got to kind of I got to step out of my comfort zone and work in animation, and it just validated, you know, that I'm a good writer. Like, I'm not saying I'm the best writer, not saying that I'm the best writer in the world, but I'm a very good writer, and I got to overcome my fear by writing in kids' cartoons. Which was something totally new for me. And so it got me to step out of my comfort zone. So I think probably the lesson that I learned, that's very important, that I always bring up because I think it's important for anybody who's working in film or television or any kind of art. Working at a studio, I used to see like a lot of really good scripts come in that they would be considering. And then I would see a really crappy script come in with a star attached to it. And they would throw away the good scripts and go with the crappy script with the star attached to it. So I learned the business side of the business early on, so that I knew that a lot of times the reason that they passed on your script, it has nothing to do with your how good you are as a writer. The same thing with acting, being in the casting sessions. You know, we would see so many talented actors and actresses come in, and sometimes they would not cast somebody because something as trivial as like the actress looked like an ex-girlfriend of one of the producers, or the financier wanted his cousin in the film to put in money. So you seeing that side of the business and learning to detach, because when you work in anything, you put a lot of your pride and your self-worth into the final product. And so if people don't cast you, or don't buy your script, or don't buy your painting, or if you've built a car and they don't buy your car, you take it personally when they don't buy it. You take that as a person, that's like somehow that's a reflection of your value as a person. And so I learned to separate that early on in my career. And I think that's why I've been able to stay somewhat sane in this business for so long, is I learned that lesson early on, that my value as a human being isn't dependent on if somebody buys my script or casts me as something because there's so many things going on behind the scenes that I would have known about if I hadn't worked at a studio. Like I would have taken every rejection really personally. And I see a lot of people do that. And again, it's because they don't understand that there are 1,000 variables that go into that one person getting cast or that one script getting made, that have nothing to do with the quality of the work or the quality of you and your talent and what you do. So I think that was an early lesson that I learned that I always try to tell people, especially if they're getting into any kind of business. Like even if you're working at a factory, a lot of times there's something going on behind the scenes that you don't know about, and that's the reason you didn't get hired. And you can't take it personally. It hurts. It never feels good when somebody rejects your work or doesn't hire you, but you can't take that as a comment on how much you are worth as a person.
You doing the kids deal, that's a breath of fresh air for you. And I could see it's kind of like, oh God, what am I doing?
Yeah. I mean, it was during the COVID time. So that I definitely needed to get into a different headspace because it was so stressful. But yeah, it was also scary. It was very scary because I was sitting in a room with people who'd done a lot of great cartoons. And I was like, oh crap, they're going to be like, why'd we hire this guy? So that kind of insecurity never goes away, I don't think, with anybody in any field.
Yeah.
So it was nice to step outside of my comfort zone and then actually get validated working in that space and being like, oh, this is cool. Thank you. I feel,
Is there a movie that you want to write that's been sitting around for a while, maybe inside that evil Jeffrey head of yours? There's got to be something, man, that's been like, I want to do this for years, but I've just never took the notion to do it. Put pen to paper.
I would like to write a comedy someday, but I haven't thought, the idea hasn't hit me yet. I do have a script that I've been sitting on, for a long time, that we're trying to get off the ground, and hopefully by Halloween of next year, it'll get made. So then we can have a follow-up next Halloween. But it's just a script of mine it's very much a quirky horror movie that's kind of it's got a Nightmare on Elm Street influence. It's got a Stephen King influence to it. And it's set in a small town, and it kind of focuses on different characters, but they're different ages. And I've had a lot of places that wanted to make it in the past and buy it in the past, but they've all wanted me to make all the characters teenagers. And I just don't want to do that for this movie. Like, I think it's much more interesting that we have we have some teenagers in it, but we also have like a middle-aged single mother, and then we have an elderly couple, and their stories are more interesting to me because there's a difference in age there. So that's the one script that I've been stubborn about. Like I won't change to sell. Yeah. So that's the one. Yeah. We'll talk about it more when it
2023.
Yeah. 2023 Halloween. We'll be following up.
That's right. Jeff will be back on the bash. That's got to be a little frustrating though, because they see, well, here comes Jeffrey. He's part of Final Destination. And then all of a sudden, we got to have those teenagers back in that movie. It's got to be like, stop. No. Yeah, no, it's always a catch-22 because, after Final Destination came out, everybody came to me and said, bring us something else like Final Destination. And so you don't want to find yourself copying yourself. But what they're saying is, because we had a hard time setting Final Destination up because you couldn't see death. And they're like, we don't get it. How can you have a horror movie without showing the killer? And we're like, that's the point. So we had such a hard time convincing the studio that I worked for to make that movie. And so then when they say, bring us something else like Final Destination, I'm like, you mean another idea that you guys are like, we don't understand how we can make this, And then they're like, well, this is too much like Final Destination. So then you find yourself in this trap of trying to like recapture that lightning in a bottle, which can be paralyzing, because you're trying to come up with something else that's like, Final Destination. And, Don't Look Back certainly has a hint of that. And originally that was going to be a kind of a karma version of Final Destination where, it's about these people who see somebody getting assaulted and they don't help. And then something or someone starts coming after them. And originally I was going to have it be supernatural karma
just straight up like whatever reason they didn't help comes back on them threefold.
Oh.
But, I decided I didn't want to copy Final Destination. So now you don't know if it's supernatural or if it's a killer. So it's a mystery. But it's a weird thing because, again, I've had to shake that part of my life where it's like, I gotta get one more thing out like you know what I'm saying, that does as well as Final Destination. It's like, I've got to focus on the work itself and not trying to like top myself or you can't it's hard to, again, like I think Final Destination, it was very much a product of its time. When it came out, word of mouth was essential to that movie. Like it opened at number 3 at the box office because the studio, they supported it, but they didn't put their big marketing push behind it at the beginning because they just weren't sure if people were going to buy a movie where there wasn't a physical killer. And then once word of mouth started growing, like instead of, most movies open at, horror movies will open at number 1 and then drop 50% the next weekend. And our movie during the week started actually going up. So it was like a week and a half after the movie came out, they started really pumping marketing money into it because they're like, holy crap, people are talking about this movie. So it's a true word of mouth. That's again why I'm so thankful for the fans, because it was a true word of mouth hit. Like the fans are the ones that went out and started talking about it. And so it started going up at the box office as opposed to going down, which was crazy for a horror film. Yeah. So, but that's not, that's like something you can't, you kind of can't recreate, it's hard to you can't make a word of mouth hit because you know what I'm saying? Like that's all up to the fans. That's all up to the movie viewers, of what movie they go out to see, and they go home and start talking about it and tell their friends, you've got to see this movie.
Do you think horror movies has lost some touch with the gore and slasher films, from back in the day that these films are out today? Because they can do so much with, CGI and adding things to the movie digitally. Do you think it's kind of lost some touch at all? Or are we just in a different time frame than, say, classic horror movies?
It's hard for me to, because their CGI, I think, can enhance stuff, which is great. I just always love practical effects. It's just, but that's, again, I have to admit, like I'm a different generation, but there's some CGI that they'll use that'll enhance a movie and you can't really tell it's CGI, but sometimes you can just tell it's CGI. And that for me, that takes it out. I think that like the last Scream movie was probably one of the bloodier, it was definitely the bloodiest Scream movie, like aside from maybe that opening with Drew Barrymore in the first one, but the new Scream was like super Scream 6, like by the, so they're getting bloodier and bloodier, which is great. I don't mean that because I like to see, again, I know it's all fake and makeup, so that's why I love it. But, we did have that whole phase of PG-13 horror movies that came out like in the early 2000s and mid 2000s. And those, I think PG-13 is okay if the story is like, doesn't require it. But if you're making a slasher movie, then I'm sorry, there should never be a PG-13 slasher movie, because that's why you're going to see the blood and guts. Like that's why, it was so fun to watch Fear Street on Netflix, because I was like, this movie's going to be a baby movie. And then it was like, holy crap, they are killing the fuck out of people. Pardon me. I don't know. I never curse in real life.
Oh, I got Jeffrey fired up.
I don't know, but I don't know, when I get on podcast, I start cursing for some reason. I don't know what it is. I think maybe it's because I don't do it in real life, but it's pretty funny. Like, I don't know. I'm sure some parents are at home going, it's not funny. And
it is. It's funny. Sit down, eat your candy, and let us be. Sit down.
Yeah.
Go eat your bologna sandwich. I'll eat one.
Yeah.
Bologna sandwiches. All right, my friend. I got to say this. My favorite B movie horror is redneck zombies. If you want true redneck, throw it to the back of the woods, up the hills, that's your movie right there. The B movies are the best ones, just about.
Yeah, I'll check that out. I love Tucker and Dale versus Evil.
That's good.
Yeah, or Dale and I always say it backwards. I think it's Tucker and Dale versus Evil. Yeah, it is. That movie was so funny because it took the whole, because I you just hate the stereotypical like redneck in the woods, inbred killer shit that they do so much of, and that movie took that whole trope and turned it on its head, and yeah, it was really fun.
I love the scary comedy too, like scary movies.
Oh, Scary Movie, the first one especially. That movie was hysterical.
Oh my God, that's when it's got the Wayans brothers in it. No, not Wayans brothers.
They did that. Well, they did that one. Yeah, They did the first Scary Movie. They did all the scary movies, but the first one I think is the best because it followed Scream enough where there was a very consistent story. I think there were some funny ones after that, but then they started kind of throwing everything at the wall.
Yeah.
But that first one, Anna Faris, who stars in that, is I think just a brilliant actress. Like,
yes.
And Regina Hall is hysterical in that movie as well. That's a great movie. I love the scary movies.
I got to know, man, what's your favorite part about Halloween?
All the horror movies playing. It used to be when I was younger. It used to be not, in LA, you don't really go out trick or treating unless, but they have like a big Halloween parade here. And I used to love dressing up for that. But the thing is, there are people here that will spend months. And so you go out and there are these huge, amazing costumes that there is no way that I have time to like outdo them. So, you go out and you're like, well, I didn't have 6 months to work on an amazing costume like that. But I just love the whole season because I think that's kind of the time where they play a lot of scary movies, new horror movies come out. And I think the fan, that's just it's like the fans like Thanksgiving, Yeah. it's just a great time of year because all the horror geeks I know get together and have like parties, and yeah, it's just a lot of fun.
It's traditional, man. Like you said, it's like Thanksgiving. I collect horror masks. I buy sometimes the silicone masks when I can find them. I got the Jeepers Creepers guy.
Yeah. Oh, my black cat.
Uh-oh.
Speaking of Halloween.
There you go.
I know, but he's getting in the window now, so the light, well, you can still see. Okay. It's very bright outside.
Jeffrey, my friend, anything else come down the pipe this year that we can look forward to? What about Final Destination 6? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I can talk about it a little bit. I mean, they're definitely working on the script, which I know about. The guy who wrote the Scream remake, Guy Busick, and his writing partner are working on it. I just don't know when it's gonna, developing the script takes time, and then also there's been some corporate mergers going on with HBO Max because it's going to end up being on HBO Max as a film. Which is smart for them because they're trying to, they're a streamer and they're trying to bring in new subscribers. So they're going to put it on HBO Max, but it'll be rated R. It's got a cool story. I can't really talk about it, but I'm very excited with what they're doing with it as far as, the script goes. Like I talked to the writers, they were very cool. They wanted to speak to me because, just as the kind of creator of the franchise, they wanted to just kind of know, they already have the story figured out, but they were like, as somebody who's been with this since the beginning, like, is there anything that you think is just essential that, we want to make sure we want to touch on? So they've been very gracious as far as like going back to the beginning, which a lot of times writers don't do. So I've been really appreciative of that. And, I'm just not sure when it comes out. Every time I talk about it, people like start hitting me up. They're like, we heard it's coming out this month. And it's like, no.
He doesn't know, folks. He doesn't know. So
that'll get rolling. That'll get rolling. And I'm excited with the story that they came up with for it. So I think fans will be very happy.
Again, man, it's awesome to interview somebody from Eastern Kentucky who has the drive just like I do to make something of ourselves and have a better life, because we both know the struggles from here. And to see you to be part of one of a franchise for horror, man, is pretty badass in my book, man, honestly.
Oh, John, I appreciate that. And it's and That's part of like one thing I've noticed, and this isn't only, Kentucky. This is a lot of times when I travel anywhere and I speak to students, especially in smaller towns across America, they always say kind of the same thing, which kind of is sad because I think we have to work on this mentality where they're like, well, we didn't think anybody from here could ever amount to anything.
Yeah.
And it's like, I tell them, like, look, I only write movies. Like, I know that sounds cool, but, you have people out there like, factory workers and teachers and doctors and people, firefighters and policemen, people out there who are really, really putting, doing work that's like bettering people's lives. And I'm not saying that making films doesn't help people because, people get hired to work on your films and it brings entertainment to people. But, there's you can do anything that you want with your life if you work hard. I mean, it's always hard work, but it's also there's some luck involved. But the luck I think you find is you have to put the effort out there, and the results will come back to you. Sometimes in a different way. Like if somebody had told me growing up that I would not be an actor full time, that would have crushed me.
Oh yeah,
you know what I'm saying? That would have crushed me because that was my dream. But by the time I got to the point where I was in my life where I found out that was going to be a very hard road, not just because it's hard in general, because acting it's still a tough road, no matter how much better we've gotten about the roles that we offer people. But it's going to be hard. But I'm happy with writing. That wasn't my dream growing up. But life will throw you curveballs, but often if you just keep the faith and keep your head down and you work hard and you treat others well, and you've got to dream. You have to dream and realize no matter where you come from, making something of yourself is subjective. Like you know what I'm saying? Like me working in writing movies is certainly no more important than somebody who's out there saving lives as a firefighter or a nurse or a doctor or a policeman. It's no more important than somebody who's like providing for their family by working in a factory or working in an office. Like you're still providing for your family and you're helping other people and you're providing, a service to society. So, making something of yourself, like, that we have to realize, like, there's nothing, it sounds fancy, but it's, you know what I'm trying to say.
I got you.
I'm choking myself up here a little bit because that mentality breaks my heart when I hear, especially young people that are like in middle school or high school saying that. Like it just breaks my heart because they have this mentality that they can achieve something in life, but everybody can achieve something, and again, your value isn't about what you do for a living. If you are working hard and you're providing for your loved ones and you're taking care of yourself, like you're contributing to society in a positive way, and anybody can do that.
Folks, please get out and check out Final Destination. If you have not checked this out, I don't know what's wrong with you, because if you are a horror fan, you have at least got to watch one of these Final Destinations.
Yeah. We'll leave it at that. If you're a horror, no, there's nothing wrong with you, but if you call yourself a horror fan, then you should at least see one or two of them.
Yeah, because if you're a horror fan like me, I grab anything and everything that I can. If it sucks, it sucks. If it don't, it don't. It doesn't matter. I watch it. I don't care. I want to watch it for myself to see. Yeah. Don't take nobody else's word of mouth. Just do it. Just do it. Check out Tamara. He did a remake of Day of the Dead. Did Awake, and his feature director, I never can say this right when I talk real fast, directorial debut with Don't Look Back. So give Jeffrey a shot. I guarantee you'll like some of his work, and if not, man, you're not a
that's all right. If not, that's all right.
You're not a real horror fan. Take my bologna sandwich back. Jeffrey, what do you have coming up, man? What do you got going on? Anything at all?
Not yet. I'm kind of keeping it low key this year. COVID kind of changed the convention circuit the last couple of years, so I'm just planning on seeing some friends and Sometimes it's funny. Sometimes some last minute convention stuff comes up. So
Sure.
I will keep you posted. But as of now, just playing it low key.
Before I let you go, good sir, would you care to do a promo for my show?
Of course not. Hi, this is Jeffrey Reddick, the creator of the Final Destination film franchise, and you are listening to BODS Mayhem Hour.
Everybody stick around. We got some great stuff coming up, and you only hear these interviews right here on this horror Halloween show. Please go check out our Facebook page. It has our podcast link and our YouTube link. And don't forget to subscribe to that YouTube link and click that notification bell because it helps me out tremendously a lot. And I get to have more people on here too. So thanks. Also, please, like I said, get out, check out Final Destination, check out everything that Jeffrey has. You won't be disappointed. And I know you guys will like it. So happy Halloween to everybody. And Jeffrey, my friend, happy Halloween to you. And
happy Halloween to you too, my friend. Have a great one.
Can't wait to get you back on the podcast later on.
Absolutely, brother. And I'll curse some more. Happy Halloween.
You're listening to BODS Mayhem Hour.
Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.